And then number 4, we can go ahead and do it. Just says make sure that that black knob at the front of the camera is centered horizontally. So the best thing is like when you're setting it up and someone is like being the sample or the trial kid, they can sit there and tell you, is the knob right in the middle of the thing.
You're talking about with
For the camera. So this knob needs
okay.
to be centered
with the
monitor.
Okay.
So we still want it to be 50 to 55 away to that. So that's about 52.
So that would need to be.
So that's in a good range. But yeah, so we just want this screw to be kind of, and it helps with the name on the monitor too. Now something that's good to note, and I wrote it up here to it at the top of the second page, is if you're having problems with a certain corner, like sometimes when you're calibrating, you guys probably remember, you'll see like one corner might be off or higher. Sometimes if you're having that, you can move the camera toward the problem side, and that might help a little bit. So in general, start with the knob in the middle, but if you're having that over and over, you can move it slightly. You know, not a lot, just a couple centimeters over that way, and that might help with that corner. So we already did that part. Number 5 is just make sure the chin rest is positioned. So we kind of talked about that you want their eye height to line up with the top quarter or third of the monitor. So just make sure they're not like down in the middle. And then make sure that the camera's as high as it can be without blocking any of the screen. So Patrick had kind of alluded to that too. So we want to make sure that they can see the bottom where those calibration targets are going to be without looking through the camera. And then 7, you can bring in the test subject. So the rest of it is pretty much similar to what we've done before. There are some helpful tips later on about focusing. So I don't know about y'all, but whenever we were focusing the camera with the eye, I kind of just thought like, oh, look at the picture of the eye and try to make it as clear as possible. Like that's what focusing is, right? But what it says is you want to focus so that, number 10, so that the corneal reflection is as small as possible. So that cyan dot, not the big blue one, but the little cyan one, that's what you should be focusing on in that zoomed in picture of the eye when you're focusing. So just look at that and make it as tiny as you can. Because it might look really clear, but that fine grain difference is what you want to look at. Let's see. Number 12, you guys all know the auto threshold. We normally do that. What you want to do with, even if you're in the right ranges, you might want to bring the pupil up even if it's in the right number range, because your goal is to make it so that it's like a filled in circle. If it's lower, it might be a circle, but there might be like a little bite out of it or something like that. Just make sure it's like a completely filled in thing. And you also don't want like a ring with like chunk missing. So just make sure that's completely filled in. And then same thing with the cornea, the little one, make sure it's a complete circle. If that one is too high, then you might start getting like little white pixels on the edge, you might have like a white ring around it. So that's kind of what you're looking with those thresholds. And then after that, you'll just calibrate and validate. And it does it by default, you know, where it tells you like good, fair, poor. But the way that it figures that out, it tells you here, it's you want at least 0.5 or less average error and 1 or less maximum error. And it'll actually tell you on the screen, when it says good or fair, it'll tell you what the average was and what the maximum was. So that's just something to keep in mind too. Do you guys have questions?
I don't have questions, I just don't feel like I've actually been
Doing it right?
doing a lot of it. Well, I mean, like, my data's a lot simpler, so I guess I don't boost as much to begin with. But it's still not always very clean, and I feel like some of these things.
I think so too, and I think it's just that, like what we talked about, it'll work. It's not like it's been so poor it won't work, but I think it'll just make your life easier.
But like, what is, I know that like in general, the threshold sort of auto set, I've never remember hitting A for an auto threshold mode.
So when you hit A, it'll just start it at a good place to start. But then you'll use the up arrow for the pupil. You can use up and down, but usually you're going to need to bring that up. And then for cornea, it's the plus and the minus. And usually that's going to be a minus. You usually want to bring that down. So like once they're there, I would like go ahead, click on the eye, get it in the little box, adjust the focus by looking at the cornea, and then go ahead and hit A. And then from there, fine grain it with the plus and or the up and the minus. And that should get you where you need to be. And sometimes the ranges, like the numbers, I don't think that those are the best guide, like the ranges that we have, especially if you're working with certain kids with like really dark eyes, then the auto threshold seems to work better because it'll set you at a place where you can see, whereas if you're going with those number ranges, sometimes it's like completely blue everywhere, and that's not going to work. That's another good thing. So I don't know where it is on here. Oh, here. Number 12, where it says I put like a wavy line under them. It's not a problem if there's peripheral blue as long as it doesn't merge with actual pupil blue. And then same thing. Again, this is not a problem if it doesn't run the risk of merging with the actual CR cyan. So sometimes when you're adjusting it, you'll get like blue on the cheekbone or even like up around the eyelash. That's harder because it might blend in, but the eyelash is not really a problem as long as it's not bleeding into the circle. So don't freak out if you have this. Like, you want the eye looking good, so even if it makes shadows over here, it's okay as long as it's not going to all bleed together and the camera's going to think that's a big pupil or cornea. Does that make sense? So I think in the past I was like freaked out if I even had any color anywhere else. So that was another misconception that we kind of had. I think this is really helpful, this little diagram that's next. It just kind of summarizes the whole thing. So if you don't have time to read through the whole thing when you're setting it up, just look at that, because that has, it shows you the distance that we talked about. A is the one that we really changed. C is still going to be 50 to 55. And then see how their eye is right going toward the top of the monitor. That's another good reminder. And then where there's an E, it has, you want that knob right in the center like it is. And D, you want it up as far, which I don't think, we never changed the height, I don't believe. So we don't really have to worry about that as much. Yeah, because our thing doesn't even look the same as this. So that's all of that. And then the only other things in here are the coordinate directions like we went over. And then I put a couple things from the forums about glasses, because sometimes that'll change. So what I found with that is like really making the